Troubleshooting IPv4 addressing and DHCP. Tell me you don't just have that gut feeling that the Cisco T-Shoot exam is going to be chocked full of IP address issues where there's custom subnet masks and things just don't line up correctly. End game. You've got to be very familiar and very fast at reverse engineering subnet masks. So here's our picture. We've got the IP address 192.168.1.127, and we need to figure out, is that valid? Is it on the right kind of subnet? Is it, all those kind of, questions. Is it a broadcast? What other IP addresses are in that subnet? All those things fall into that same category of IP addressing issues. The typical way that I would do it if I was working it out completely, and honestly, I still do it this way just because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy to do it, is I look at that subnet mask, I go, okay, that's 10 or 255.255.255.224, and I break out that last octet. 224 equals 111000000. What's that lowest one converted back to a decimal? That'd be 128.64.32, right? That's my increment. Then I just walk through it. 192.168.1.0, and I just start adding 32, 64, 96, 128, 160. Well, actually, I passed the IP address long ago, and immediately when I look at this, I go, okay, well, that is the last IP address in this subnet right here. That is, my friends, a broadcast address. There's no way that computer can have that IP address assigned to it. It is invalid. Or maybe you'll have something like this. We've got the IP address, subnet mask, default gateway. It's part of a bigger scenario. Now, again, it's not going to be this easy. They won't single out this small little computer and a router and say, ooh, what's wrong there? Because it's too obvious. This will be embedded in a much bigger scenario with multiple routers, switches, VLANs, everything else, and you'll be expected to find it. Now, looking at that picture, you're going, not bad. I don't know where the accent came from. 172.16.68.65, right? It's okay. But no, it's not, because when you reverse engineer that subnet mask, you're going to look at it and go, okay, well, taking 240, that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. That'd be an increment of 16, right? If we're writing that out. 16. Okay, we've got to do increments of 16, 0, 16, 32, 48, 64, 80. Have I passed it? Yes. Okay, so 64 through 79 is one subnet. Now look at the default gateway. Okay, wait a sec. That's in this one. So are both of those addresses valid? Absolutely. The gateway is the last valid IP address from this subnet. The computer is the first valid IP address from this subnet, right? That's very tricky, right? That's how they get it to you. Now, I know some of you are looking and you're going, okay, good, I get it. Is there faster ways of doing it? Yes, there are. First off, whenever you're thinking powers of 2, you can always make big jumps. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, down we go. So if you're, I'm doing one where I've got 172, 16, 68, 65 over there. Well, what if it was 165? It's going to take a long time to count by 16s all the way up. But these are all increments of each other, so I could take a big jump and just say, well, let's start from 172, 16, 68, somebody's calling my phone and leaving a message. Who are you? They hung up. So I've got 172.16.68.0, and I could take a big jump down to 128, and then just start adding 16 from there, or even add 64 to 128, or add 32 to 128. Again, I can add all these up because I know if I count by 16s, I'm going to hit every single one of these increments that are there. Likewise, there is a shortcut you can do to grab this increment. You can always take the subnet mask, subtracted from 256, meaning let's say we've got our 255.255.240, right? Mask something like this. You can do a quick subtraction program. Broken. 256 minus 240 equals 16. That's a quick way to get your increment without having to break out the binary. When you have to do this quick and on the fly and a bunch of them, that might save you some time. But guys, I've got to give you my gut feeling. Once for me, and I'm talking Jeremy Chara, when I'm on an exam, I still write it out in binary. Why? I just know it. I can see it. I'm like, I've proven it to myself. I'm not using some shortcut that I'm scared of. So I always write out the binary just like I did to start off both this and the previous scenario. Other areas of IP address troubleshooting typically deal with things like DHCP, where you can use your Cisco router or layer 3 switch as a DHCP server. I have found in my experience that if you make the offer to the Microsoft group, hey, I'll handle the IP addressing, they're like, dude, it's all yours. Like, they're happy to give it up. So you come into the router, you go in and create your DHCP pool, IP DHCP pool, and give it a name. I'll just say Jeremy. Come in here and type in the network that you want to hand out from. So I'll say network 10.1.1.0 with a subnet mask of /24. You can type in the full decimal mask. Hit enter, start doing the default router 10.1.1.1 or .254. DNS server, 4222, 8.8.8.8 as the secondary. So you can configure the DHCP pool like that. One thing that you need to remember on Cisco devices is that you need to exclude addresses typically before you create the DHCP pool. Because right now, if you've got clients asking for IP addresses, you know what's happening? It's handing them out. It's responding to those requests, and it's doing it from the lowest number. So .1 goes out first. .2 goes out. You're like, oh, not .1. That's my router's address. Well, we want to go in there and do IP DHCP excluded address, and we'll do 10.1.1.1 through 10.1.1.50. I don't know. Put all your servers, access points, switches, everything else down there. Find that scheme. Now, sometimes it can be painful if you want to do, well, let's do from 50 to, 52 or 65 or whatever my fingers happen to fall on the keyboard. I mean, it's not as pretty as using a GUI like in a Microsoft server world for doing it, but I don't want to say it this way, but I'd bet my router runs longer than a Microsoft server. Just saying. Other areas is DHCP relay, making sure that you have the helper address configured here. Going into the interface that you want to set up. Where'd my router go? There it is. Interface fast Ethernet 0/0. So let's just say, again, whether it's a VLAN SVI, switch virtual interface, like VLAN 10 receiving those, or maybe it's fast Ethernet 0/0, IP helper address. Type in the IP address of the DHCP server. So we'll just say, 192.168.1.50, right, is the helper address that we want to use. Now, any IP or any DHCP request that it receives here as a broadcast will be forwarded as a unicast to that DHCP server. This guy acts as the proxy to hand it back to the client. Most of what can go wrong I've already talked about just by covering the concepts in a flyby fashion. IP address right, not in the same subnet, that's your mad reverse engineering skills. Router not forwarding DHCP requests because maybe you've misconfigured the helper address, not put a helper address, typed in the wrong helper address, put it under the wrong interface. All those are possibilities for not forwarding those on. Duplicate IP address assigned. If you have maybe a static device, a server out there, assigned 10.1.1.10, right? And your router's configured for the range of, 5 through 250 to hand out in the range. Well, eventually it's going to hand out the 10 address to some device. Well, in that handing out, the device is going to complain to the DHCP server saying, hey, I detected somebody else out there has this. It will actually remove that address from the pool forever, ever. I actually have seen, this reminds me, I have been in a environment not too long ago where they just did not have enough IP addresses for the subnet. So the guy who was there didn't understand VLANs or didn't have the capability to expand it. So what he did was change the lease time really low, like super low, to like 30 seconds. Maybe this is you, man. Maybe I'm talking to you. You're like, that was me. So what happened in that environment is he changed it so low that you had these wireless clients that were kind of on and off connection. They close the lid, bring the lid back up. Essentially, it was handing out addresses that, half a second ago were assigned to somebody else, and the somebody else went in sleep mode, resumed. It ended up saying, oh, that's a conflict. And what happened is it ended up removing almost all the IP addresses from the pool. Essentially, the network problem got worse and worse and worse, that they were getting 169 addresses. And we finally looked at the binding table. You can do a show IP DHCP binding, and you find out that, well, wait a sec. Not all of them have been handed out until you type in show IP DHCP conflict, and you see all these addresses that have been conflicted at some point because they set the lease time so low, and all of the laptops losing connection, coming back on, all that sort of thing. Remove them all from the pool, so it became this self-compounding problem anyway. That's definitely something that you can run into, so always verify using those show commands below. Interface IP assignment or pool subnet mismatch, meaning you've got the DHCP pool, which hands out IP address of 10.1.1/0, or .0/24. You've got the router right here, and you have it in a subnet other than 10.1.1/0, or maybe you've misconfigured that IP address on there, or there was something else that was coming to mind. When you've got the helper address, to where you've got, let's just say a switch here with all these SVIs for, 5 different VLANs, right? And you've got all these different pools of clients that are asking for IP addresses. Up here is your DHCP server, right? You're setting these as relay addresses to where they hit this and then relay up here. If you have an interface IP assignment or pool subnet, meaning you don't configure the right pools up here, or you don't assign the right IP addresses on these interface and match them up to the pools, then the address is not going to be assigned correctly. I'm explaining this poorly. I think the best way I can explain this is when I first got into networking and learned about VLANs, I was always confused. I was like, how does the DHCP server know which pool? Let's say I've got pool 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which line up to 10.1.x.0 subnets, right? Like where X, represents the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was like, okay, you've got a computer over here who sends a broadcast, right? So we don't know where that guy is at. That broadcast comes up here. How does he know which one of those pools to pull from? Right? Is anyone else with me where you're like, you were confused on that for years? For me, in my case, I was a little slow, right? So I was like, how does it know which pool to pull from? Well, the way it knows is the SVI that gets that broadcast address. Let's just say it's 10.1.1/24 is the SVI, VLAN 1 interface that gets that. It actually forwards it to the DHCP server with itself as the unicast source address. Remember, this guy receives the broadcast, converts it to a unicast. Well, A unicast always has a source IP and a destination IP, so it's going to put itself as the source address and forward it up to the server that you specified, and then the server looks at that IP address and goes, oh, you're wanting to get from the 10.1.1.1 or 10.1.1.0 pool, so let me give you an address from this. So obviously that's what I was trying to get at, is if you have these not aligning to the IP addresses of your router, then it's not going to work correctly. You now know how to troubleshoot IP address and DHCP misconfigurations. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.